All right, everyone. Welcome to this November 3rd Storage Provider Meetup. Hope you're all doing well. I'll kick this off with a couple announcements about releases that are either already hit the shelves or will be today or in the immediate future. So, yeah, reading these lists out, I've noticed over the course of doing these storage provider meetups, these lists are getting longer, which is a good thing because we have a lot more software that we're shipping. We're able to support a lot more configurations. So, reading these release notes is becoming a bigger block of time, but that's a good indication. And you know what? I hope they get even longer. So kicking that off, the full licensed Linux installer that just got upgraded. There was a minor issue with if SPD was running as root as you entered the migration. That's been fixed now. The relayer, we sent out a pretty significant update last week. That was version 1.01, and then today we are releasing. Not sure what version, I guess probably 1.02, but it's just a minor UI update. There was an issue with the cache in the UI not displaying totally correctly, or I mean the cache was still usable. Of course, it was doing its job. It was just a cosmetic bug, and that's been fixed now. But as a reminder, in case you missed it in the announcements channel, that major relayer version that went out last week, that fixed some critical bugs in host.io, fixed some bugs with the database port, and it updated the host.io, Minio, and gateway versions to the latest 0.3.5. And if I recall, I think we're actually hoping to have another version of those executables, the host.io, Minio, gateway. Those are the kind of sub-modules that make the relayer work. The relayer isn't just one software binary, it's kind of a stack that works together. Hopefully in the next week we'll have a new version of those, potentially either in the wild or in beta testing with some of our partners. And lastly, the Xminer gets some love too. The Xminer will have a supervisor and UI release that's it's been in our beta testing channel for the last couple days, and that should be good for a public release either later today or early tomorrow. And that contains some kind of minor changes, just things like we finally settled on gigabytes instead of gibby bytes. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it, but that could be the source of some confusion. There was also some kind of minor bugs that came up, like some people were having issues with their wallets unlocking automatically. That's been worked out. Don't even get that was a really weird one that was causing that one. I feel bad for the dev that figured that out, because it was like 5 layers deep to figure out what was doing that, but we got that figured out. And then the UI, the pages load a lot faster. Thank you, Cam, for that. There's all sorts of improvements and under the hood things to make when you switch tabs just a little bit quicker. I know it's kind of a meme that the UI feels snappier. I know that's kind of like a pseudo joke in software development, but this time it really is. So thank you, Cam. And the income data, that's been something that for a little while, actually kind of a long while, wasn't totally accurate. Your current month would usually be accurate, but then when it reported your last month and your lifetime earnings, usually it just displayed 0. And that's finally been worked out as well. So it should be reporting accurately your income for the previous month and your lifetime earnings. So looking forward to that, hitting the floor and you guys able to look at your Xminers, and I mean, no major changes, so it won't look totally different, but at the same time, things are getting improved every day, and moving our way toward fully polished product for grandma to throw in her closet and be able to accurately know exactly how much it's earning, be able to switch pages quickly and and use gigabytes instead of gibby bytes. So there we go. Moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about our documentation approach. So this has been something that has been kind of ongoing. I always say documentation's never really done, and that's true because things are always changing. You could always be having more in-depth tutorials, or it's just any documentation base is kind of living and breathing, and you're never really done. So one of the things that we've learned over the last year. So we used to have most of our docs for your like storage providing and network info and just kind of all the information that you might want to know if you are getting started on SC Prime, especially as a provider. Those used to be on docs.scpri.me. That was kind of our main documents repository. But then as storage providing became a more comprehensive aspect of our network, we started to support kind of zanier configurations. And as just that whole process kind of got built out and matured, then it made a lot more sense to dedicate kind of a separate storage provider docs repository. So that is something that we've now done. That is available on docs.xminer.net. Xminer.net should be familiar to you, so just stick the docs in front of it, and now you have our special storage provider documentation. So for a little while anyway, I think we are still, like, we didn't just totally take all the docs that were on SC Prime and then move them all over to Xminer, and that way like all the links break and everything, and it was just kind of a mess. So for a little bit anyway, just to help you guys transition over, we will still have some of the most popular docs pages available on both, but just in the future be mindful that the Xminer domain in general is kind of the domain for storage providing, whereas the SC Prime website is more just kind of general network and blockchain and that kind of thing. So in the future, the SC Prime docs will mainly be just kind of general network information. It'll cover some kind of aspects of the blockchain and more that kind of thing. And if you're really just interested in storage providing and you want tutorials or troubleshooting advice, that kind of thing, that will be on docs.xminer. So we'll try to make it easy for you. Of course, we'll still have the docs referenced in all the places that they're referenced now. We're trying to come up with a slick way to really quickly and easily navigate between those different docs repositories. Our hands are a little bit tied in the sense that we are using, of course, like a document repository builder. It's pretty much the same one that everybody uses, GitBooks. And there are just some limitations of what you can do in that. So we can't totally, at least without taking too many resources, we couldn't totally do everything that we wanted to do. But we work within the framework and try to make life easy for you guys. So yeah, moving forward, now that we are in November, because it's been 2 weeks since we did our last meeting, that cadence is probably going to stay this way for a while. For a lot of this year, there was enough content that we could cover every week, and we were getting people kind of up to speed on how different aspects of our network work. That's still definitely a thing. It's not like, oh yeah, you guys know everything now, right? I guess we can retire doing these. No, there's still definitely lots of stuff to talk about. But I think just the pace and the cadence of kind of every other week makes a lot of sense. But then on our end, what that allows us to do is we can put a bit more effort into each of those storage provider calls. So some things that I'm hoping to do over the next couple of weeks, kind of begin doing, is having some more guests and kind of varied guests up here. So I'm hoping to have some storage providers up here to talk about their experience of what providing is like, how they kind of came to the project, some of their highs and lows, that kind of thing. But as well as some kind of more prepared and polished subjects. So I did see some suggestions in the channel earlier for topics like metadata. That's a very good suggestion. So yeah, the idea is, well, we're still obviously keeping you guys in the loop on what we're up to all day, us being the full team. A lot of our attention is on the kind of under the hood things that aren't necessarily super interesting to storage providers, and this is the storage provider call. So I think we are going to try to pay homage to that and make this call be a place that storage providers can come to hang out and learn info and come away a little happier than you came in. So that all being said, it is November now, which means that October 31st has passed. Hope everybody had a good Halloween. But the scariest part of Halloween is that the rebates were ending. Now, we gave lots and lots of notice for that. That shouldn't have been a shock, but the rebates, well, not totally ending, but at least being revised and kind of spun down. So for the longest time, we had very generous rebates going for all of our products, whether they're hardware or software. We still will offer rebates on some of them. So I know the Xminers, for example, will now be at a 25% rebate as opposed to the roughly 40% they were at before. But At this point, we've given lots of notice to you guys. I think that's been very fair. And our network is kind of moving out of the just kind of building up phase into more of a production network and kind of an early production network. So I think it makes sense for us to kind of treat that as a new phase and say, hey, you kind of had lots of notice and you had lots of chances to get rebates for your different purchases for this period, but now we are kind of moving to a new phase. So rebates are a changing, and I hope you got your purchases in before November 1st. One other thing, so socials. Okay. Well, this is actually, this is maybe not super interesting to you guys. I hope it is, but so our XNSCloud brand, of course, that's XNS Services, which is the enterprise-ready company that's able to offer like SLAs and support and production and enterprise-ready software and hardware as well soon for you guys. We have Twitter and Facebook accounts. Those are XNSCloud. So that'd be like twitter.com/XNSCloud, facebook.com/XNSCloud. That'll be our homes for where we're posting. Recently, anyway, we've been posting different articles that cover kind of resources around the project. I think those should be interesting to you guys. I mean, if you're coming in here every week and you like hearing what we're up to, I think that's a fantastic way to keep up to date with what's happening on the project. This week, we brought attention to an article that was put together by our lead developer, Pavel. And in this article, he discussed how he and another Relayer developer came up with a kind of improved and systematic way to approach Golang HTTP APIs. So if you don't know what that means, that's okay. But this is definitely more of a technical article, as should probably be expected by being written by a lead developer. But that's okay, because there are a lot of technical people that are interested in what we're up to, and a lot of developers that could potentially use this API. So we have open sourced this API. We use it everywhere internally. We use it all over the place because it's very good and it definitely speeds up development. So yeah, I just thought it was neat to be able to bring attention to an article like that and kind of show some of the technologies that we're using and innovating on in our day-to-day work, and open that up for the greater community as well, for other developers to take advantage of. So once again, all of that and more, if you want to just be reminded over the weeks and see what articles we're bringing attention to as they come out, or past ones that have already come out potentially, then that would be, once again, twitter.com/XNSCloud or XNSCloud on Facebook. I feel like there's a joke somewhere in there about the $8 blue check mark. I definitely appreciated Faustian's announcement post the other day about how if you want to keep your blue storage provider role in Discord, that's just $8 a month. Of course, that was a joke, just poking fun at current events, but yeah. Anyway, so kind of in line and in keeping in the theme of the next couple of weeks being hopefully bringing a lot more kind of production and information to these storage provider meetups. I am also in the midst of preparing a curriculum for a program we're calling SCP University. So I think SCP University, I wasn't totally ran for it. I think there has been a program like that that's run before, and I think the goals will be similar. So out of this SCP University, essentially how it'll work, we'll take signups from the community and people that have shown a lot of interest in our network and what we're up to and how it all works, but don't necessarily have the ability or the time or whatever to sink into reading all the various, like the white paper and all our different docs and reading through pages and pages of Discord. Because, I mean, thus far, a lot of the time, if you really want to get the full vision and the full scoop, there's a lot happening here. So that might be what you have to do. So the SCP University, the goal of that will be a program that will be kind of open for signups, and then we'll take maybe 10 to 12 people at a time and do a kind of live, maybe Zoom or Discord kind of lecture style thing where I'll have a couple different lectures prepared. We won't, obviously not all back to back to back, but maybe paced out a week at a time or something. And it kind of breaks down, like something like the blockchain level, what's going on there, and how does that play in nicely with our smart contracts? How are our smart contracts designed so that they can enable things that protect the renter and things that protect the hosts themselves, what's possible, what isn't possible. There's all sorts of areas for me to dive into. So yeah, that's in development now. I think over the next couple of weeks, you can expect in the announcement, either in the announcements channel or somewhere else in Discord, there to be some kind of sign up list for if you're interested. I'm looking forward to making that be a thing, and looking forward to having kind of polished and prepared presentations for people who just want to know more about our network. Because if that's you, and that was me, I've been in that position, and that's kind of how I made my way slowly in the community toward a team role, was just kind of paying attention to the people that were happy to share info and try and glean as much of it as I can. But yeah, no worries if you don't pick up everything first time. Nobody does, but that shouldn't stop you from at least coming out of each learning opportunity a little bit wiser than you went in. So aside from that, we also have our contractor, right? So this has been, let me figure out how I want it, where the story even starts. I'd say maybe around March or April. Well, actually, no, I'll go back further than that. So I'll kind of explain what our storage contractor is. So the deal is on XNet services, of course, we don't expect our customers to handle kind of on-chain currency ownership and custodial responsibilities, that kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, our whole approach is informed by bringing this Web3 capability and the incredible peer-to-peer parallelism that comes with that, and bringing that on kind of Web2 terms, meaning that there's a lot of companies that already have expectations of how storage cloud services should work, and a lot of them kind of like the fact that they work that way. So there are things like SLAs that are offered, those being service license agreements. So those are kind of contractual obligations that a storage cloud will have a certain amount of uptime. There'll be certain terms that are kept. It's basically a way of kind of knowing exactly what you're getting with somebody actually on the hook to make sure that you get that experience. Because a lot of the time that kind of goes against the Web3 ethos, where a lot of the time in crypto and blockchain stuff, you don't necessarily know exactly what you're getting. So you take on some risk by doing that. And I'm sure you don't need a huge imagination to understand how, if you're a large organization, why that might make you hesitant to move over to something, even if it does have a lot of capabilities. So knowing that, and having talked to a number of enterprises that are interested in this space, but don't necessarily have they're not, they feel a little hesitant by some of those kind of classic blockchain and crypto things, like taking custody over coins. How do you know that those coins aren't going to get like rugged? How do you know that they're still going to be worth something a year from now? What are the tax and legal implications? It's kind of messy. So we knew early on that for the first while anyway, that was going to be a layer that we kind of absorbed, being like us being the team. So we create all the contracts on the network, or at least almost all of them. And those contracts can be used by our customers, so they still get all the advantages of that come with Web3, and all the parallelism, peer-to-peer. Nobody's like, no intermediary. Nobody can block you or access your data in transit. Like all these kinds of concepts that work in our favor. You're still able to take full advantage of those, but without having to take on all the kind of risk and responsibility that comes with custodial duties. So that's kind of the pretext for why we have this contract server. So this contract server, its job is, well, it actually is pretty complex and it has a lot of jobs, but the kind of high level one is just that it creates contracts. It manages the contracts that all the storage providers have, and it allows renters to be able to use them and upload data, and everybody's happy. So our storage contractor, we have, for most of this year, we've had two. We had one that we spun up earlier this year that had all sorts of improvements. It was running on a much more robust configuration. And this was the one that we spun up earlier this year, intending that it would carry the project forward and be the kind of production ready one. But there was still the previous storage contractor that we've had for years up to this point. That kind of reached an end of life where it made sense to start spinning it down. It had some configuration parameters that just couldn't be continued forward how we wanted them to. So there was kind of an overlap for a lot of this year where one had kind of reached the end of its life and was kind of marked to be retired, and but we already had the replacement one up and running. So there was kind of an overlap for a lot of this year and this summer. But we have reached the point now, I think about a week ago, or at least earlier this week, where that storage contractor, the older one that's being retired, finally all of its contracts reached the end. So I think we all saw, at least if you're somewhat active in Discord, you probably saw all sorts of people coming to the Discord and posting their chart and saying like, hey, so there's some variation of is anything wrong, or did anybody else get some data drop, something like that. But yeah, this was all expected. We posted about this in the announcements channel. We've talked about it in previous storage provider meetups. So at the end of the day, if you missed all of that, I mean, it's still okay. It was expected. We knew this was coming. We tried to warn everyone. But yeah, now that process is complete, our old storage contractor is fully spun down. So all of the contracts on the network are from our new, much more powerful and robust contractor. And these will be fully kind of production and customer ready contracts for you guys to use, or for you guys to be providing storage on, and then our customers to upload data to. Another development over the last 2 weeks. So we've picked up a couple ASIC mining pools over the last few weeks. So that's exciting. Once again, a reminder, I'll say this often because I see this misunderstanding all the time, which is okay. I understand how it happens, but I will clarify once again that storage providers are not mining blocks. So the rewards that you guys are getting are smart contract payouts, but those actual smart contracts are coming from blocks that are being mined through proof of work. So there are like ASIC miners. If you know what an ASIC miner looks like, you know that they're typically big, loud, expensive, and pull a ton of power and put out a ton of heat. Those are that's the kind of mining that I'm talking about, not the ASIC shoes. So yeah, for the longest time, or at least for like pretty much all of this year anyway, we've had just kind of one large mining pool. It's called Sia mining. I think, yeah, Sia mining, the name comes from, I think it was one of the first pools on the Sia network, and then a couple years ago it branched out to support a couple different protocols, including ours. But for various points in history, that pool and the organization behind it has been the largest pool on a couple different networks, including ours. So we weren't too panicked by that, by the fact that we just kind of had one big mining pool. I guess a lot of people might consider that to be potentially a risk or something like that. I don't think we were too fussed. We usually have a pretty good relationship with the owner. They're pretty hands-off and stay out of all the drama. So yeah, that was kind of a fine arrangement. But at the end of the day, if you can have more pools, that is usually better. And we've been lucky because in the month of October, we picked up 2 new ones. So we brought attention to that today in some of our tweets and last week as well. But we are now up to 3 pools. So we have the original prime.sci mining one, and we now have DX Pool, which is based out of China. DX Pool is kind of interesting, not just because they support a bunch of different like cryptos and blockchains as well, but I think they have a somewhat of a relationship. I don't know the full story, but they have somewhat of a partnership or a relationship with Goldshell. Goldshell being an ASIC manufacturer that has kind of popped up over the last couple of years and has put out some very interesting and often pretty powerful ASIC mining machines for various different blockchain networks, including the algorithm that we're on. So Goldshell does have a very powerful ASIC miner that's available today. I think it's something like 17 terahashes per second, which is pretty incredible. I believe that makes it the fastest miner on that algorithm. So that's made by Goldshell, and Goldshell has some kind of partnership with DXPool, who just joined our network. So I'm seeing. I mean, I'm external to any arrangements that are going on between those companies, but I'm seeing some kind of synergy that could form there. Seeing as Goldshell and DXPool, they seem to have some kind of interests aligned there. So it's cool to see that come together. And yeah, huge thank you as well to RPC Crypto, who is a longtime community member. I believe earlier in this year, he posted a very in-depth guide on ASIC mining in the consensus mining channel. So this kind of introduced you to like what is an ASIC miner, what are your options if you want to mine on our network. I just kind of gave a pretty good overview. So now he's gone one step further and actually set up a mining pool. So that's pretty awesome to see. I'm glad to see that there are a number of miners that have already joined both of those pools. What we would like to see long term is that there's a lot of hash rate kind of spread across all three pools. That would be ideal. It's not the end of the world if any one pool is over 50% of the hash rate. We have a pretty good relationship with all those pools, and we're not too worried. But at the end of the day, more hash rate on more pools is better for everybody. So we would encourage you guys to at least consider, if you are ASIC mining right now on our network, we can ask you to consider checking out some of those pools that have just popped up. And yeah, potentially moving some of your hash rate over there. I think I've covered everything that I had on my notepad. So this would be a good opportunity for questions. I see I already have one hand up. Idol, what's happening?
Hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, so I have a question. So this is probably related, or I believe it's related to the old contract relayer that's shut down, and I was well aware that I would lose that storage, but I've been told now twice in the support channels on two different occasions when these older contracts expired that I had some sort of contract issue on my fully licensed DIY examiner. Because what's happening is it still shows that my storage is in use. So even though I'm actually SCP committed storage is like 7 gigs, it shows I'm using 300 gigs. I'm not expecting a resolution to this on this call, but I'm curious to know what's the best way for me to get support around that. How should I approach that? Because I've pinged a couple of times in support channels and I keep getting told it's a contracts issue, but nothing changes. And also, I want to add that I might be perceiving this to be a problem when it's not a problem, and you guys will fix it at some point. I don't know.
Sure. So I'll start that with kind of explaining. So on our Grafana panels, so we do have a place where it's reported our SCP Corp used storage, and then we have a chart as well that shows the reported used. So the reason why there can be a disparity between those two, the figure that's on the top where it says like the used by SCP Corp, that's a figure that comes from us, actually, that comes from our contract server, and that's at this point we're only looking at the data that's on our now primary contractor. So that is the amount of data that it's reporting to us that you have in the contract that it's managing. Whereas in the chart that's presented, that is a figure that's or like the data that it's getting and using to plot the chart is what's reported from your SPD instance. So that's the reason why they can sometimes be out of sync. So in this case, it sounds like SPD is still reporting the total usage as if it had the old contract. Now I'm trying to think. I could think of a couple different versions or a couple different reasons why there could be SPD reporting data that it doesn't really have in an active contract. There are a handful of bugs that we sometimes see in data from an old contract not really being freed. So I'll iterate, or I'll say that none of these issues that I can think of are really a problem. It's just kind of a cosmetic issue of SPD thinking that it has data that it doesn't really. There's no like functional issue there. But yeah, so I could think.
Nothing I need to be worried about in terms of I'm not getting data or something stuck that shouldn't be stuck. I should be, you should just ignore it until it fixes itself.
Well, this might be helpful. So you said it was 7 gigs used. Has it been stuck at that number for a long time?
Since the last contract expired last week, and
Okay.
it still says 300 gigs in use as of today.
Yeah, so 7 gigs is low enough that I think you should be receiving a pretty good flow of data. So if that stays flat for another little while, I'd say another couple days longer. At that point, I would think the issue would then be that SPD is potentially not able to access the folders that it thinks it has mounted. That can sometimes, yeah, that becomes a bit more involved. Then we would need to do a bit more digging into. So you said you have the full license, correct? So that would be
Yeah, it's a
running in
DIY XLR,
Docker.
but yep.
Okay, yeah. There's there's a couple things it could be. It's probably going to be a bit of a headache to work through. I just say that because yeah, I would plan on having 1 to 2 hours to kind of troubleshoot. But it's not something that or it's something that people have gone through before. So
So my question is what's the best way to approach that? I have no problem committing that time when I'm ready. How should I go about that?
I would go about that by heading to the support channel and saying, "Hey, Henry, I'm the guy from the call, and you told me that you were going to get this fixed, and I'm here. So let's do this." Because
All right,
yeah,
that
yeah,
answers my
we'll get you
question.
taken care of. I'm sorry that it took a couple tries, but yeah, no man left behind. We'll get you covered.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. All right, we'll invite someone else to the stage. How's it going, SWN?
It's good. It's good. I'm driving, so I apologize about that. I've got a few questions. One, I saw on the open discussion channel something about a weather monitoring um, device or sort of mining company that's out there, and I was just curious if you're aware of that, and then also if it has any relation to what we're doing here with SC Prime, or is it just something completely different?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. So I did see in the open discussion channel the other day that there were a number of users that were kind of sharing some of the other passive income type networks that they're participating in. Um, I think so. Yeah, I think probably that weather thing that was shared was just kind of in the context of like here's another network that's doing kind of a similar idea to you guys in the sense that you host some or you have a bit of hardware where you're hosting a service from home. It's I think in the weather for the weather network, not like the weather network as in where you find out the weather, but that weather crypto network or passive income network. I believe the value that they were getting was just from having this huge network of homes and residences all over the world that are recording or like real time and accurate data. So I'm sure it's kind of obvious the value in something like that, particularly if you're in meteorology. But that's not something that is built into the examiners. We don't have um, like hydrometers or like whatever
Yeah.
temperature sensors. Yeah, we don't have that stuff built into the examiners. I think there is potentially room one day. Um, I don't think we're really having these discussions today, but I don't see why you couldn't one day, um, why we couldn't have some kind of tie-ins to potentially other types of these networks. I would be open to the idea anyway of if there was some kind of module that you could run on top of an examiner that just kind of reports some info to some other network and you get to make some income that way too, as long as it doesn't really mess with our thing. Then I don't see why we wouldn't do that. It's just probably at this point it's not really a priority because we uh, are putting so much development and effort into still building out features and fixing bugs and things with our software. So we're not really at the point where we can dedicate a ton of resources to something like that. But I don't see why we couldn't one day.
Okay. Great. And then, so I guess, confirming that it's not something that's loaded on the X miner. It's not like this company is running their software from the X miners. So I got it. It sounds completely separate, and people just sharing those ideas. The other question I had is there a difference between the settings that I can make in my DIY versus the Examiner related to the download and upload speeds regarding the token amount? I think, and this may have changed by now because it's been a little while, my DIY, I can up all of my token amounts to the max amount to still receive my incentives. But last time I checked on the Examiner, those amounts were set, and when I tried to change them, they never took effect. They just went back to the defaults.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what parameter exactly you're talking about. So if you're talking about the like bandwidth price and the or not bandwidth, the storage price and the collateral price, you're correct.
No,
No, not those.
not those. It's the bandwidth. Yeah, the upload and download speeds. Not speeds. Sorry, token amounts for for sending and receiving data. You can set those in the DIY, and they also have that feature in the X miners as well.
Right. Okay, yeah, I just pulled my X miner up. So it looks like the download bandwidth price is 5 SCP per terabyte right now. I'm a little rusty on what the incentives ask is, so I don't know at what figure it goes out of incentives range. I believe that 5 SCP figure is just that comes from it being $1 per terabyte. Because I think I have seen that download bandwidth price move around a bit over the last little while. So that seems likely to me that, yeah, SCP price is around 20 cents, so 5 of them is about $1. So yeah, probably the Examiners are just sticking to $1 per terabyte bandwidth. But yeah, for DIYs, if you're not running Supervisor Lite, so it's not auto pricing, then yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the incentives range looks like for bandwidth.
Okay, great. I've got a few DIYs set up in Docker containers. That Supervisor Lite that you just referred to, I find out how to install it. It wasn't 100% clear whether or not I install that within each Docker, or if I install it elsewhere and it's able to control the settings for the DIYs and the Dockers.
So do you have multiple images running on the same computer?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, that one's a bit of a headache. Probably, I'd imagine, yeah, so ask in one of our support channels where we have a bit more time to kind of think about your setup and look over that. Yeah, setups that have like multiple providers running on the same computer. At that point, you're having to distinguish between your different instances using ports or like process IDs or something. So that's a little more involved. We'd probably consider that kind of somewhat of a non-standard setup. So that's probably why that isn't really encompassed in the docs.
Okay.
But yeah, so hit us in the channels and we'll take a crack at getting that working.
Okay.
Yeah.
The bare metal OS is unraid, so the instructions were for Linux and Ubuntu and stuff like that. So it didn't make sense to me, and I'll follow up in the forum. And any updates on the basic license? Future of those? Has any decisions been made on those?
Trying to think if we left any decisions hanging or dangling. Can you help me out with what that pertains to specifically? Did we leave something unresolved?
Well, maybe it was an assumption I was making because it sounded like things were going towards a subscription-based model. It sounded like things were getting pushed into the full license arena, and so I don't plan on upgrading my basics until I guess I have to, and I don't know if there's going to be a point as to when that's necessary, or if the basics are going to go away and full license is going to take over.
Yeah, so I can just speak to what our thinking is today. Our current thinking is just that the full licenses, we're trying to make them so awesome and so powerful that everybody just wants to have them. So I think if sometimes our language gets a little strong and we say things like everyone will want to have a full license, I can understand why sometimes that might sound kind of vaguely threatening. We're not saying like that could sound like there's kind of a veiled or else. I don't really think that's not intentional anyway. We just put a lot of elbow grease and planning into the full licenses and trying to make them do as much as possible to the point where everybody would want to have one. But yeah, I expect DIY licenses for a long time anyway to be able to keep doing everything that they're able to do today. It's just that we're trying to make the full licenses be really attractive because it makes sense to kind of have a platform that has all these automated tools, that has the ability to do some more comprehensive things beyond the scope of the basic license. And that's what we're trying to bring some love to, but not in the sense of taking away from basic.
Okay, great. And it's been a while since I've joined the meeting, so I'm not sure if this came already, but it sounds like at this point, test data is going away and the network is moving towards real data. As I'm keeping an eye on the Grafana and all the the charts, it looks like data is rising over the weeks and months for where we're at now. I'm wondering, is there any exciting news regarding partners or people joining the network and using the storage network?
Yeah, we have a couple partners in the pipe. Probably nobody new. Like they're all familiar figures. I will kind of clarify that the network today, it is a mix of test and like real user uploaded data. Around the test data specifically, if we ever say that test data is going away, that's kind of a misnomer because we will always be testing. So there's all sorts of different like upload speed tests, download speed tests, long-term like EC resilience tests. There's like a bunch of different test processes and profiles that we have together today and will continue to do in the future. So there will always be some amount of test data on the network. Right now, that happens to be a large percent of the data on the network, but that's just because like we're not going to be reducing the amount of testing we're doing. If anything, we want to be stepping it up because Host.io is getting more and more powerful and able to push an incredible amount of data onto the network in a very short period. So yeah, I'd say just right now the makeup is high of test data, so that probably will, as more customer data comes onto the network, that proportion will decrease, but there will always be some test data just because we do actually use our own service and we have to kind of push it to the limits. So that kind of answers the first half of your question. The second half specifically, so I think we kind of highlighted earlier in the year that approaching MSPs and CSPs was kind of our main, kind of how we saw reaching the largest market the soonest. So that's still our approach. Over the next couple of weeks and months, some of our focus will be within development will be moving over to like providing API access and SDKs so that if you're using the relayer, you're able to use it kind of headless, like you don't have to do everything through the UI. So that would allow, like potentially, if vendors have their own management console, that would allow them to still be able to use the relayer, but as kind of less of a complete, ready to use package, but would allow them a lot more flexibility to use with their existing configurations. So yeah, like API and SDKs are something that we're working on, and that we're kind of keeping a good relationship with some of the MSPs and CSPs that we already have relationships with, that we're kind of partnering with them to guide some of those decisions and how that build out looks.
Okay, great. And one final question. Any updates on the additional incentive parameters like performance and speed related to the bandwidth that's available where the storage provider is located?
Yeah, nothing really solid to report. I will say that we're having discussions internally around how we want to approach measuring user like bandwidth speed. Um, so those are conversations that we're having now of like how best can we approach measuring each user's speed. So those kind of conversations are happening now. Probably once we have a kind of formal and rigorous approach and method to that, then we can probably introduce those incentives. So I'd say it's still a little ways away, but the ball is kind of rolling on that. It's just some work on our end that we need to get through first.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for asking great questions. All right. I will say that this will be probably our last question, or at least our last guest who's asking questions. Trying to keep these hopefully under an hour, but I mean we'll see. I don't want to be the ruiner of fun or anything, but yeah, go ahead, Diet.
Yeah, Dietrich actually, but yeah, you shall not ruin fun. So my questions are really around when you have more than two machines operating from the same location. My understanding is that when a relayer is going to record or send storage data over a particular in a particular time, that it's only going to maximum it will select will be two um, providers in one particular storage. That's correct still?
Yeah. So what's going on there? Um, yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I've seen some kind of uncertainty around how that works. So the relayer itself, the way that we're able to kind of reach some of the performance figures that we're able to reach, this kind of gets a little bit into the guts of erasure coding. So it's a little complex, and I think I covered it on one of the storage provider calls a couple of weeks ago. But basically, without getting too much into the technicals anyway, the data itself, the file, like yeah, let's say you're uploading one really big file, maybe a video or something. It's kind of taken one chunk at a time, or one kind of, the formal term is a row. But you can maybe think of the whole file as being made up of 12 rows, and each row itself is going out to a different mix of storage providers. So the old approach, how it was done previously, that was able to get okay but not fantastic performance, was that all 12 of the rows might go to the same maybe 100 storage providers. But how we were able to really punch through the performance kind of ceiling was when we made it so all 12 of those rows could go to different storage providers. So from each row to each row, there will probably be some overlap in those storage providers. But theoretically, you could have, like if each row is 100 providers and you have 12 of them, you could have 1,200 different providers, or you could have 600 that you're using each one twice. So the way that we implement this kind of limit of two per, or two kind of providers on the same network at the same time, that's just implemented per row. So that isn't too much of a limitation, I don't think. So it's not like each relayer will only ever be using two of your maybe 3 or 4 providers, and that's like some kind of hard limit. It's just as it's going through the data that's being uploaded to it, it's just making sure that each row isn't putting too many pieces in the same location. And once again, I'd like to highlight that this isn't like a punishment or anything for having too many providers in one region or something. It's just for the renter's perspective. There's just a bit of risk in having a lot of your data in kind of one region. So yeah, so it isn't a kind of punishment or anything. It's just the way that it has to be in order to keep high redundancy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And because I'm my current approach is to stack up machines here at my primary location, because getting machines at additional locations is a whole other level due to the unless it's a space that I own or what have you, just because of the requirements of getting everything set up and the port forwarding involved, and control of the space. But I think that that's the model I'm going to go with as a storage provider, is as the network grows and is used more, that then I can start pushing out devices from my main location to other locations that I gain access to as that becomes needful. So yeah, but thanks for clarifying that. That was good.
Yeah, and thanks for speaking up as well. That's definitely something that I think we'll see more of as the network builds out further, is people kind of spreading out or sprinkling out a bit more of their providers. So if right now they are just kind of all at home, and that's because for the past year this has just kind of been a science project for them, but as they start to feel like, oh, like there's really something happening here, this is pretty serious, then maybe put one in a closet, hopefully with permission at work or something, maybe at a buddy's place, just kind of wherever you think would be a responsible place to put a storage provider. I think we'll see more of that kind of thing, and maybe a topic for a future storage provider meetup. Anyway, so I can see the events discussion channel is having a lot of fun. I think I will start to wind down the storage provider call here. I would like to thank everybody for showing up again. It's awesome how many people were able to attract live and in the recordings as well. It means a lot to us, and I'm excited to be able to use this platform in the coming months to kind of really focus in on some subjects that pertain to storage providing, to make kind of your life a bit easier and be more informed anyway when it comes to maybe topics like metadata, like how are you supposed to back it up? What does it mean? Yeah, like there's all sorts of questions. So I think that is a pretty compelling topic, but there's so much more we could do that we'll probably never run out of topics. So yep, thank you all for coming. It's been a good chat today. Thank you everybody who asked a question. Thanks for everybody who listened. And yeah, have an awesome rest of your week and weekend. Take care.